Well, welcome to another edition of AP's Profiles in Christian Living. My name is Mark Powell. I'm the convener for the National Journal of the Presbyterian Church of Australia. And my special guest with me today is Dave Jensen. Dave is an evangelist and the son of the very famous Peter Jensen, who was the former Archbishop of Sydney as well. But you're famous in your own right, Dave. You've done lots of great things and are doing lots of great things in the world. Mate, welcome. It's great to have you with us.
Thanks so much, Mark. It is great to be here. The other day I preached at a church and my mother goes online to listen to my sermons, bless her, and they had recorded my sermon as being preached by Peter Jensen, misspelled her last name, called me Peter. I was, of course, offended, but I sent that to my dad and he said, "You've never been more complimented in your entire life." So,
That's fantastic. Mate, the first question I always ask people, and I think is in many ways the most interesting, and that is, tell us, how did you first become a Christian? Oh, Dave, we've lost sound from you, bro. No. That's it.
1 2 1 2.
Now you're back on, buddy.
Sorry, Mark. It's my fault I keep touching the microphone. Sorry.
That's totally fine. It's really easy on this program to edit. So what I'll do is I'll just pitch the question again, and then I can easily edit this out.
Thanks, Bella. Sorry about that.
So, Dave, the most interesting question I always ask people, I think, is how did you become a Christian? How would you answer that?
I was, brought up in a family who know and love Jesus. Mum and dad were the first Christians in their family. So I was brought up knowing the Lord, being taught about Jesus from a very early age. And of course, as we mentioned, my dad's a minister and was the principal of Moore College. My uncle Philip was the minister of the church that we went to, and so on and so forth. But a really helpful realization that we always need to remind ourselves of, particularly for the children of pastors or children of Christians, is God doesn't have grandchildren, he has children. And faith is not inherited. It's individually brought by the repentance and faith brought about by the Lord. So I drifted from Christianity in my teenage years. I never an atheist or an agnostic, never changed religions, always called myself a Christian. Deep down knew I wasn't. But it just became evident from the fruit of my life that Jesus wasn't number one. Jesus wasn't number 100 for me, really. So, fast forward to my late 20s. By that point, I'm divorced, a couple of kids. I was in the Australian Army for around 10 years and a long, long way from God. Never thought about God. The once a year I had to identify religion. I would have called myself an Anglican, but nothing. And I woke up one day, brother, hungover, really, no plans for the day. And I went to bed that night as a Christian. The very, very fast version is my sister had given me a laptop with some sermons on it. I'd never watched them. I decided to watch them. I heard the gospel afresh. 2 Corinthians 4 made real. The God of this age who had blinded my eyes was destroyed by the Holy Spirit who opened my eyes to the gospel. And then I call up a mate I know, Tim, who was an army chaplain, and he led me to the Lord on the telephone. And so that was 15 years ago that and in hindsight, I now know I had never understood sin. So I'd never repented. I'd never understood the gospel. And that's remarkable because I'd heard the gospel. I'd been catechized with every catechism you could imagine, back upside down and backwards. But it's a great evidence for me as an evangelist that, hey, if someone's not a Christian, they don't understand the gospel. They may be able to recite it, but they don't know the Lord. And so there's no plan B to this. This is what it is. So that's how I became a Christian.
That's fantastic. I've got a son in the military, and he relays to me just how tough it is, particularly spiritually. What did your mates around you? How did they respond when they saw that you'd become born again?
Yeah, it was a wonderful, in hindsight again, moment of putting hair on my chest spiritually because I copped it. I mean, I mate. Dead set. If people think, it's one of the ironies, of course, as people accuse Christians of bigotry and narrow-mindedness. If you think that's so, just go call yourself a Christian, in the public square in any sense and see how you go. And that's how it went for me. I was actually met with shock at first, mainly because people were like, "What do you mean? You've always been a Christian," in the sense that I'd always kind of identified that way. But then I explained what had happened, and I'd become an authentic believer. And yeah, that was a lot of mirth and disbelief, mockery. But can I say, none of it hateful, just gentle, bantery kind of thing, but relentless, a relentless kind of. There's a few nicknames for Christians in the army: God Botherer, Sky Pilot, this kind of stuff, and worse. And so I sort of copped those things, but those things, having them early on in my Christian walk, they didn't make me uh, batten down the hatches. They made me realize, oh, this is worth it. I don't care. This is worth it. And thankfully, brother, because I became a Christian at 28, I wasn't afraid of non-Christians. I knew non-Christians. They didn't intimidate me. Like I wasn't shocked by non-Christian people or anything. So, yeah, thankfully, God used that reaction initially for me to go, well, that's the norm. That's what I can expect. And that really helped me as years would go on evangelistically.
I mean, it is pretty amazing. Here you are, you're in the military, you're one of the boys, and well, your life's completely turned around. Okay, there was hostility. Was there also interest from others?
No, not really, not initially, but over time there was. So this was one of the key parts I realised. There was a general positive support by my real friends, like, oh, that's nice, Dave, and I was a very violent, heavy drinking, womanizing kind of guy, and so a lot of them viewed it as kind of like a fresh leaf. Oh, that's nice, Dave, you're getting your act together, kind of thing, and there was a general sense of support. As time went on, and those months turned into years, and you move a lot in the military, so I probably only stayed in touch with 5 to 10 guys. Over that time, I became almost like a personal chaplain for them. I became the Christian that they knew, and a bunch of them have become Christians. So praise God, amazingly. And that has come as a result of the long-term witness of, certainly my part has played a part of the long-term witness of the transformation that's stuck for me. But initially, yeah, it didn't seem like, no one was sort of going, oh, Dave, what must I do to be saved? But it happens all the time. I mean, 2 years ago, my best friend in the army passed away. He had got a terrible injury in the army and become a drug addict as a result, and had a drug overdose. It was terrible, horrifying story. And I conducted his funeral, and I hadn't seen a bunch of the guys at the funeral for 12 years, and they were the same, but just 12 years older. And there was I, the minister, taking the service, and it was a shocking thing for them. One of them, the toughest guy I ever played army football with, army rugby with, came up to me afterwards, and he was really curious. He said, Dave, what's that all about? What do you mean when you were in my sermon? And then it turned out he lived in Brisbane. I was going to Brisbane the next week to speak at a men's day. He came. He came. He actually stayed outside. He didn't want to come in, and then he did come in, and I introduced him to the pastor. And 2 months later, he became a Christian, and his wife became a Christian. And I mean, they're Baptists, so they got baptized on Christmas Day. It was very dramatic, kind of thing. But little things like that, brother, not little things, enormous, amazing things like that.
Yeah.
The continual grace of God in my life of going, oh, wow. I wasn't looking for, I never would have guessed this guy, ever. Jason Johnson is his name. I never would have guessed that Jason would become a Christian, but boom, there he is. And then bang, his wife. And, just incredible how that can work. Oh, the army, forgive me, brother, but the army is a fertile harvest field for the gospel. Because you've got a lot of young people, they're cut off from family, but also that they're really in an extreme environment. And so if you can have good gospel people in that space, under God, we've been able to see a lot of people converted.
I mean, I've got to ask you then, have you ever thought about going back in and being a chaplain yourself?
Never, ever, ever, ever. 10 years. I've done enough. Why don't you do it, Mark? No. I have. Listen, I certainly considered it, but I didn't, mainly because very early on in my Christian life, I fell in love with the local church. And I think there's a great role for chaplaincy and evangelists in chaplains of all types and stripes. But for me, the action where that happens, that's the parish, or do you call that a parish in Presbyterian? What do you call the local church?
No, we just call it what the Bible says, brother. Church.
Yeah. So, what's a
You're a Sydney Anglican by birth, mate. You should know this.
I know you'd think so, but nonetheless, I just realised, actually, the best thing I can do for my army guys is uh, be at a great church where they're hearing the gospel and connect them in that way. And so I love chaplains, padres. I think it's a great thing, but the army equipped me to speak to people of all types and stripes of backgrounds, and so I was able to go, I can. And also, gee whiz, it's a hard life. I'm happy to be free of it.
Yeah, look, we're going to talk, in this episode about evangelism and the local church. And I've been hearing about all the great things that you've been doing. But before I ask you, and we really get into that, I've got to ask you, how do you go from being in the army? Okay, you're a Christian now, but then how do you go from that to being a full-time evangelist?
Well, it was a convoluted journey, but in essence, I realized I was evangelizing a lot of people, and my church minister said, "You should be an evangelist." And at the time, that really wasn't a job. But there was a job advertised in Sydney, up where I live, for a high school, the King's School, so a very prestigious school for a youth minister. And I didn't have a theological degree. I'm divorced, so I can't be ordained in the Anglican system, which is fair enough, and to be a senior pastor. But also, I really just wanted to get amongst it. So I ended up, my first job foray into ministry, I went and became a minister, a youth minister at the King's School. And can I just say, talk about culture clash. You may think, if you know anything about Kings, they've got a uniform that looks like half military, half paramilitary, South American paramilitary, half movie usher. It's a very strange collection of outfits, but it's just a high school of kids. And I went in and I was used to yelling and being yelled at and screaming. That's just generally how you conduct yourself in the army. And then not only can you not do that in education, well, you may if you're a teacher, certainly not as a youth minister. And it was a real culture clash for me, no matter how posh and prestigious King's was. But I very quickly was able to ascertain, the best part of my job here isn't the class. Well, I like the classroom, but I loved the one-to-one with the boys. I loved preaching the gospel. I loved seeing them converted. And there was a little church attached to the school that met at the school chapel. And that was where the magic was for me. I just loved getting kids along to this church and preaching and teaching and all those sort of things. So from there, I left King's and I worked for a Sydney church called Multicultural Bible Ministry, MBM, with a man called Ray Galea. And they had a role at their church for a full-time mission pastor or evangelist. And so I ended up there. I did a year at college, very barely got through, found it very, very difficult. And ordination and senior pastor, that role wasn't available for me, which I'm more than content with. But this role was, and so I just ended up almost sort of accidentally falling into it. And can I say, when I worked at a church like MBM, where this is a church, brother, where you would routinely see upwards of 40 to 50 adults genuinely converted every year. Not just converted like hand in the air, but staying in the church, that converted people from all types and stripes of backgrounds. That I call that Christian crack or Christian heroin. That's just flatline to the soul. Whoa! And that was addictive to me. So I did that for a few years. I then went to Northern Ireland in Belfast and worked in a church there. Then the Central Coast of New South Wales EV Church, where I was the mission pastor there. So I've ended up really being really privileged to be able to focus on nothing but evangelism in church for 10 or 11 years. And I think I'm almost unique in that great privilege. But it's really been exhilarating, and I'd pay to do it. Don't tell anyone. I would pay to do it. It's the best thing. Honestly, it's one of the best things I've ever done in my life. Yeah, I love it.
I mean, I've heard about, a lot of the fruitfulness associated with your ministry, and you talk about 40 or 50 people at MBM getting converted every year. What sort of things were they doing that facilitated that? Because obviously, we both believe conversion is of God and a sovereign work of the Spirit. And yet we're called to be responsible and to preach the gospel and to partner with God. What are some of the things you learned and that you've integrated into your own strategy of evangelism?
Well, very quickly I learnt that if I was to see people converted, more and more people converted in the life that I have under God by his sovereign power and decree, and I'm as reformed as as everyone. And God does the saving. We know that. I believe that to the bottom of my soul. But if I am to be utilized by God most effectively, I need to get to work stealing every good idea I can, because I'm not an ideas man, Mark. Remember that from the castle? He's an ideas man. That's not me. I'd never had a new idea in my life. And so I get to a church like MBM, which has a long history of conversions, people getting genuinely converted, and I'm given the responsibility of that. So I realize, okay, there's this history here. I'm going to learn from these guys, but also I'm going to ask other brothers and sisters, well, brothers really, of who are doing the same role, but seeing people converted, who are theologically aligned with me, Reformed evangelicals. I'm just going to see what they're doing and steal everything I can, just try and work out what are they doing, what things are replicable, what are the patterns that are emerging amongst in sort of non-American English-speaking evangelicalism. So the three of us, like what's happening, and that's what I really did for the first year at MBM, and then I've continued to do that over the last 10 years. And here's what I've been able to work out, brother. And I worked it out quite early and was able to apply it, and since then been able to be hopefully helpful to other people with it as well. The most important thing we need to continually remember is that there's only one message that saves, and that's the message of the gospel, God's gospel, about Jesus, and that has come for his glory, and that for his name's sake we are saved, and is the power of salvation. There's no point fluffing spiritual pillows. There's no point doing anything beyond that. We need to give people the gospel. So that's been the case for 2,000 years and throughout the Bible, of course. But what we've been able to ascertain over 2,000 years of church history is that there's four key elements that God most often uses in evangelism. And they are the word. So the word does the work, Romans 10. People. So he most often uses people to proclaim the word. It doesn't have to be best friends. It could be a bus driver. It could be a stranger. Secondly, people. God most often uses people, is proclaimers of that word. Not best friends always, can be strangers, but he uses people. The third one is time. And when I say time, I don't mean that people need a year in the Bible to become Christians. Some people need 3 minutes. But even if they need 3 minutes, they need then for the rest of their earthly life until glory in the word with Christians anyway. So it really doesn't change that much. And what we then need more than anything, as well as everything, is prayer, that we're doing all of this humbly dependent on the Lord of the harvest. So word, people, time, prayer. And that's actually applied differently in different contexts. So George Whitefield, John Wesley, John Knox, I'll give you that one. And then we go on to Billy Graham. And then in the last 20 or 30 years or so, in Australia anyway, you've seen churches who see the most conversions most often utilize an evangelistic course or Bible study, Christianity Explained, Christianity Explored, the Discover course, Life, on a regular, repeatable, reliable, sustainable basis within the rhythm and pattern of their church life. And they do very little else but that. So you don't need a whole range of pre-evangelistic get-to-know-you events. They're not wrong, biblically speaking, I don't think, but they're often just a waste of time. They don't really do anything. And you can burn a lot of gospel energy and resource into that space, when really, if you make the evangelistic course or Bible study socially warm but evangelistically sharp, you can do both those things at the same time. So the churches that we're seeing the best results of evangelism, and by best I just mean we're seeing people converted the most, they were doing remarkably very simple things very well and repeating them over and over again. And so that's what I've been able to see happen at MBM and then elsewhere in my ministry. And I really don't see any diversion of that anywhere within our network of evangelicals in Australia.
Yeah, you're coming down to Hobart on the 22nd of September. It's a Monday, speaking at St John's Prezi. It's open to everybody. All denominations are more than welcome. In fact, we enthusiastically, warmly invite everybody to come. What do you really, if you could say in a nutshell, what do you want to say to the churches here in Hobart? How can you inspire and encourage them to the work of of evangelism in our context? What are you going to say?
The first thing I would say is that God is not finished saving people in Australia. That's not some sort of I'm not a soothsayer. It's not that. Now, the Bible tells us that our role and responsibility is to make disciple-making disciples. That's the Christian ministry. That means the creation of new ones under God and also the maturing of the ones we have. It also, I want to point to the Great Commission as one of the great passages which encourages us towards the maturity of the saint in evangelism. So if we want our people to become like Jesus, it means that they need to evangelize. They need to be involved in the realm of evangelism in some respect or another. And so I want to offer that God's not done saving people in Australia. I think it's evidently clearly commanded and encouraged throughout Scripture that we should be doing this. But the third thing I want to say is that it's very possible that many of the barriers our churches face in evangelism is not external but internal, and not in a hugely complicated way, but actually quite simply that often we're doing too many things. We're overthinking. We're doing analysis paralysis. We're spending a lot of resources and energy considering how we sort of tell the first part of a joke and forgetting the punchline. But actually, if we start at the ending with the gospel, how are we going to tell people the gospel in our context? Start with that and work backwards. You realize, actually, this works. And so this is what we've been able to see in New South Wales, but also I coach ministers all around the world, actually. And time and time again, you realize rich, poor, black, white, mainland, Tassie, wherever, that the biggest barrier to evangelistic growth is usually internal, not external. And it's also done when you can approach evangelism with optimism, which I think the scriptures give us, and hope and persistence and patience and perseverance, and have the humility to learn. And I've got to offer, brother, I'm not offering any idea that I've ever had new. You would never come to hear me say anything like that. What I'm going to be offering are the carefully packaged, put together fruits of my thievery from willing participants, I have to say, of many, who are able to go, hey, these are the things that work. And so it's not a silver bullet, but it is a bronze fist. It works most of the time in most places. So I want it to be enriching and encouraging, but it will be very, very, very practical. And one of the criticisms actually can be, oh, well, you're saying one size fits all. And I want to offer, no. There's a nuance that will change in some slight ways, but the word, people, time, prayer, that doesn't change. And so if we consider how we do that as our first principles, that's what we're going to be talking about. That's it, really.
It sounds fantastic. Can I ask, what will you say to people that are feeling discouraged, right? And feeling, like, oh man, I've been at it, I'm seeing very little fruit. What do you say to that? What do you say to the person at that point?
I want to say you're in the perfect position. I don't think you can improve without feeling discouraged. There's a great graph diagram for love of me, I can't remember the name of it, but it talks about sort of personal growth, and in how we apply and grow in competence. And it really has this graph that starts, midway up and then has a big dip down, and then it kind of goes a slow, steady trickle up. And it's talking about really how we perceive ourselves. And so you start thinking, hey, this will be pretty good. And, this will be quite simple. And I think most of us come into evangelism thinking, no, I just need to train the people, train the saints, and then get them to convert their friends, and then whooshka, away we go, without realizing that the blockage in Christians who evangelize of fear is the most tremendously huge blockage we can ever possibly face. Evangelism is not a light switch. The evangelistic zeal is not a light switch you turn on in Christians. It's a sensor light. If you stop moving, it turns off. We need to continually do it over and over again. It's very, very, very tiring. But then on this graph, it's really going, you think it's good, and then you dip down and you hit the pit of despair. And the pit of despair is the realization, I don't know what I'm doing. Now, at that point, we can do several things. We can go, well, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm going to stop. I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm going to blame culture. I'll blame the other churches. I'll blame God. I'll blame the saints. But at that moment, brother, that, of course, for many of us, and I want to encourage, I think, for us as Christians, it's a wonderful moment of going, if I don't know what I'm doing, but there are others who are seeing fruit, the best thing I can possibly do is actually learn and go, tell me what to do. How do I do it? Not as a quick fix, but how do I actually grow in this area? And it's actually in that discouragement space I want to say, hey, you're perfectly positioned to do that. And I want to say as well that, of course, the great news is we may be post-Christian or not. I don't love that term. I think Australia's always been pre-Christian until the Lord's return. But I think in one respect, there is the possible indications that there is a change in the air for some parts of our demographic and area and population where people are more open now, probably than at ever point in our lifetime, to the gospel. Gen Z, the most open generation since the Second World War, is the headline. Now, is that true? Maybe. But I tell you what, the perception that it's true is really good because it gives you hope and optimism and going, hey, I can do this. Is God doing something? Well, actually, God's always doing something. So it's okay. But actually, so just hold on to that whiff of hope in the air and grab onto it and work hard at improving and embrace the discouragement. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really encouraging word because Jesus continues to be on his throne. And he continues to give us authority to go and make disciples of all nations. Dave, really encouraging to talk to you. Really looking forward to you coming. If you're in the Hobart area or in Tasmania in general, Monday, the 22nd of September, starting at 7 p.m. at St. John's Presbyterian Church, Dave Jensen's going to be coming and speaking. Dave, we're really looking forward to you coming. Thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you so much for having me, Mark. I can't wait to meet you there. If you're not there, what's wrong with you? Come on down. Even to disagree with me, throw things at me. I'm used to that from Presbyterians. So come on down and do that. No. I can't wait to see you. So catch you then.
Yeah, it'll be fantastic. And obviously, again, it's open to all denominations, Reform, Baptist, whatever. As long as you love Jesus and you want to see Jesus proclaimed, it'll be wonderful to see you there and hopefully encourage you in the Great Commission that Jesus has left us. Well, this has been Mark Powell for AP's Profiles in Christian Living. I hope you've been as encouraged by this episode as I have, and I look forward to seeing you next time.